Good afternoon. Today, my guest is David Schisgall, the director of the film The Oil War, um, a documentary. David, this is a huge topic, and it is so meticulously spooled out that it takes something that is really complicated and makes it digestible and accessible, at least while watching the film. I I found it hard to retain each beat, but I felt edified while watching it. And so I'm interested, how did you prepare for this? Was it like, when you were in college writing a research paper? Did you do an outline?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I would say that it came from, a couple of decades of working on these issues in the Middle East. But I was talking to actually some academics, and um, we were bemoaning. I mean, we were not bemoaning, but there's a lack of like sort of 50,000 foot history, history from 100,000 feet of America's experience in the Middle East. One of the people I was talking to was Michael Oren, who used to be the ambassador from Israel, who's written a book that's even more. It's like a mile high. It starts in, 1715. And so, I felt there was a lack and I felt there was something to say because there's so many rhymes. I mean, I'm not expecting people to like follow every beat. What it should sweep you along in the rhymes and in the consistency of policy. We have a tendency to see, to see big changes within presidents. But if you look at it from a real high point of view, you see much less. For instance, like, in 2003, George W. Bush believed that that he would knock off the leadership of Iraq and that the civil society of Iraq would organize itself into a functioning government. And there were reasons to think that.
Especially because he would remove the weapons of mass destruction.
let's just call that like let's just call that a public relations.
Okay.
From the broadest
Right.
sense,
Yeah. No. Okay. Yes.
the broadest sense is like that was like a legal justification. But from the broadest sense, it's like we're going to get rid of this regime, the very top, the top 2,000 people, and the Iraqi civil society is going to reorganize itself. And you can spend a month in Iraq, like going having dinner, every night with someone who you're like, yeah, this is gonna here it is. Um, okay, and it was a total disaster. Okay, fast forward to 2014, and Barack Obama thinks that if we topple the regime in Libya, that, civil society of Libya is going to reorganize itself in a way that joins the community of nations. In both cases, they were going to do it with their considerable oil revenue. And, in both cases, the exact thing happened. History was repeating itself. And so that's what really interested me was the through lines over the last 50 years of our policies and our illusions and how and the consist and the consistencies between administrations and between parties on this issue. And so what else do we want to do? We want to, and Andy Bacevich, has been working on this as well. Working his whole life on this, and so I was really reading his books, and I said, okay, well, this is the guy who can do it because he's written books that are in that vein. Um, and it was, I think it's very compelling to look at our experience that way.
It really was illuminating, and it took what's difficult, just if you're going about it on your own, to connect the dots, at least had an overview that felt even-handed. I mean, you have a point of view, but it felt even-handed, and there were moments where you could disagree, but stay with the narrative you were presenting. So
Yeah,
really, I wish there were more movies like that. You
yeah. I
have
mean,
one great asset of the film is your incredible archival footage.
yeah. Oh,
How, what's your advice to a young filmmaker, or a first or second time filmmaker seeking to make a film heavy with archival footage?
there's a lot to say. Um, there's a lot to say about that. But in a certain sense, the archival preceded the film, in a certain sense, because,
Well, in another sense, the archival.
sorry?
I mean, the archival did precede the film.
Well, I mean, preceded the like, when we had the idea, well, when we were, I forget how, but we became aware that Rich Remsburg, who is one of the great archivists, um, a lot of the archive producers know of collections that have not been used. Okay. Like, and in this case, it was all, in the National Archives. So they know of collections that haven't been used. And if you are, speaking to them, you can match a collection that hasn't been used with your film. So I'm talking about making an archival film that has like fresh archive. There's a whole different thing if you're, and so in this case, there was all of this stuff that, hadn't been used, that was sitting around, all of these, newscasts made by the government for the government, all of these materials made to sway public opinion in the Middle East, all of this, raw archival from the Gulf War. Um, and, the archive producers, often know about this stuff, not just in politics, but in other places. And I recommend I recommend that to first like find the good archive producers, become an archive producer. I think that every moment the archive producers become more and more and more important as the amount of filmed material in the world, is being is becoming, extrapolated, Um, uh, so I think, I think like in a certain sense, like I think it'd be good for people to, think about the archival first. Even if you have the subject, think about the archival first and not the archival but like the archival that might be out there. For instance, I'm waiting for somebody I mean, I think it's hard to get this stuff, but I'm waiting for someone to make a film that's entirely surveillance cameras in a city that follows some event, almost verite style, through the city from all of the different angles that exist in the city. Someone's going to do that. It's going to be great. It's got to be the right story. But if you kind of imagine, what like, police body cams have become, something that people are really, really excavating in a good way, and interrogation tapes. So when I guess I would say that, my advice is think outside the box. Don't think about things you've seen. Think about things that nobody's seen, and they're out there. You can
That you
find them.
have reason to believe may exist, but you just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been used because that's going to be the best and freshest stuff.
Were there filmmakers you were consciously channeling or works you were thinking about as you set out and made this movie?
That's a really good question. It's a really good question. Um,
I mean, the answer could be no.
I would say there's a lot of films in my head. There's always so many films in my head. But when you first said that, the film that popped into my head was Reefer Madness, which is this classic film of all this archival made about like the war on marijuana
Right,
from the perspective of the government.
right.
And so, a great deal of our archival is, the war from the perspective of the people who are believers and are and from the government talking to itself, the government talking to other people, what that sounds like, what's being said. So I would that would be my initial.
So maybe extrapolating from that, one of the sources that may be very fertile archival material are propaganda films of one sort or another that um,
Yeah.
were advocating a certain position, which now in hindsight may look
I would argue that a lot of the archival in the oil war falls into propaganda, some of it more directly than others. There's this wonderful piece in it of this film that was made for the Arab world about how they shouldn't listen to the communists was made with puppets. Like it's at the beginning of the film, there are these puppets that are, marionettes that are like doing this thing about how like, the West, it was from the 50s, and the West is, better than the communists. But the funny thing about it is like it's puppets. It's like it's puppets. Um, so yeah, I'm a
It
great believer.
reminds me, I mean, it's a bit off topic, but I remember in college taking a course where we read Gone with the Wind, not as a accurate historical document of antebellum South, but as an accurate document revealing how in the 20s Southerners like to think about the antebellum South.
That's right.
It was really illuminating because beyond the story she's telling, you see this very different story that is being told by her telling of the story she wants to tell.
Yeah. I want to pick up on something you said earlier, where you said it was even-handed. And I'm taking that to mean, well, I'll just tell you that in the making of this film, um, the financing at a certain point, we had this at the time, it's different now, but at the time when we started it, which was, there was still in the Democratic Party, and in the Republican Party, like a real hawkish sentiment, for lack of a better term, a real interventionist engagement sentiment. I think both parties now have moved away from that clearly. But when it was when Hillary Clinton was running for president, that was that's something that it's a policy that she's been associated with for her entire career. I mean, for good or for ill, I've certainly was not on the right side of all those issues at all. But so and then and on the right there was that too. It was there was still a lot of that on the right, and Andy Bacevich is a conservative and was funded by conservatives, but of course there's a lot of people on the left who also were. It was one of these places where at the time like the far left and the far right actually had the same position on this issue, and so um, when it came to the funding, we had a deal in place that had money from, both like a large and well-known left-wing doc funder and a large and well-known conservative cause funder. And we were very close to pulling it off. Um, and I think it would have been a beautiful thing had we been able to put those two names at the front of the film. Um, but people got cold feet, especially on the left. And
No, but I think the result of the film, I mean, yes, that would have been a great visual.
but we also would have had several more $100,000.
Well, that would have been good too. But the message of the film, I think, does reflect that. I mean,
Yeah.
reflect that that was your intention.
Yeah, no, I think it's true because once you look at it beyond the partisan, once you look at it from 50,000 feet, as we do at other periods of history, you're not looking at it from a partisan perspective as much. But my point here is, I wish in Doc that we were doing more, that we could do projects that were done together from people on different sides of our political spectrum. I think that would be it's very difficult, but I think it would be both really good filmmaking. I think it would broaden audiences. I think it would improve the view of the genre. Across. I think it would widen audiences and increase credibility. There's definitely a credibility problem with like docs among certain areas for sure. And I think I just feel like that if people can find that and make it happen, and people can have the courage, the filmmaker courage, but also more importantly, the institutional courage, I think that would be a really great development.
Can you think of any project in your future that might be appropriate for that kind of meeting?
No, I don't have something in mind, but I'm sure there's a lot of if there's filmmakers watching it, I'm sure that there's other people who do, and I just
What's
wish
your
I
next
was
film project?
sorry.
What's your next film project?
I'm really not supposed to talk about it,
Okay.
so
And don't.
um, I
Well,
mean, my most previous project, I have a project that's out right now, um, that's called Anatomy of Lies, and it's a three-part series for Peacock about a woman who pretends to have all of these diseases to rise and become a top writer at Grey's Anatomy, and came out really well. Has a lot. And that's just the first episode, and then it gets really weird as and she like would take people's stories and then pass them off her own, and then read Grey's. And I don't know, it came out really great. I'll just rather than
Wow.
my next film, my last film, I'll plug.
Okay, good. Well, I look forward. I haven't seen that, but that sounds insane. And I look forward to seeing your next movie and to keeping in touch. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Andrew, for all of your efforts to get good documentaries out there.
Pleasure. It's a job. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.